Class 7th History Lesson 3 of NCERT book, that is the Delhi Sultans. Majorly, this chapter discusses about those rulers who ruled over Delhi, who made Delhi as their capital, and who built their city within Delhi. Children, you must have heard the story of Pandavas in Mahabharata. इंद्रप्रस्थ was the capital of Pandavas and ये माना जाता है जहाँ आज दिल्ली है वहाँ actually में बहुत पहले इंद्रप्रस्थ था. So पांडवों ने भी दिल्ली के ऊपर रूल किया, but the name was इंद्रप्रस्थ. But apart from that, the initial ruling dynasties to rule over Delhi were Rajput dynasties. The first dynasty was Tomara dynasty and then came the Chauhans. Tomara Rajputs का first ruler था Anganpal Tomar. And Anganpal Tomar was the first ruler to rule over Delhi, and then for a long time Prithviraj Chauhan from the Chauhan Rajputs ruled over Delhi. So Anganpal Tomar became the first Rajput ruler to rule over Delhi, and he even built a city within Delhi that's called Lal Kot. Later on he was defeated by the Chauhans, and Prithviraj Chauhan, he conquered Lal Kot and renamed it Kila Rai Pithora. And during the time of Tomara Rajputs, बहुत सारे जैन businessmen दिल्ली में रहते थे और उन्होंने बड़े temples भी बनवाए. And during the time of Tomara Rajputs itself, coins were also in circulation, and those coins were called as Delhi Wal. After the death of Prithviraj Chauhan, Muslim rulers established their rule in India, and 5 Muslim dynasties one after the other ruled, and those 5 Muslim dynasties taken together are called as Delhi Sultanate. They ruled for about 320 years, that is from 1206 Common Era till 1526 Common Era. And the Delhi Sultans who ruled over Delhi built many cities in the area that is known today as Delhi. For example, Delhi Ikunha, Jahanpana, Siri, Firozabad, etc. So पहले दिल्ली पे रूल किया राजपूत रूलर्स ने, and then came the Delhi Sultans, और उसके बाद आए मुगल रूलर्स जिनके बारे में हम पढ़ेंगे in the next chapter. Here are the maps showing areas ruled by various Delhi Sultans during their reign. मगर ये दिल्ली सल्तनत के बारे में हमें इतना इंफॉर्मेशन मिला कहाँ से? We got this information through coins, inscriptions, architecture and Tariq. Now Tariq is a new word for you. Let's study its meaning. Chronicles written by scribes during the rule of Delhi Sultans were known as Tawariq. Now children, do you remember the meaning of chronicles and scribes? We read them in chapter 1. Chronicles are those historical events that are written in the order of their occurrence, and scribes are those people who write manuscripts with hand. So Tariq or Tawariq, it can be called a manuscript written for Delhi Sultans. Tariq is an Arabic word which means history or historiography. Tariq जिस language में लिखे जाते थे, that language was Persian, and this language was the language of administration in the Delhi Sultanate. There were many people who wrote Tariq, like secretaries, administrators, poets, courtiers, and जो authors थे Tawariq के, they led a very rich life and they got various rewards as well, and they lived in cities, not in remote areas. And these people were so important that they even advised the rulers on various things. For example, how can the ruler preserve the social order in the society? So, Tawariq के authors का अपना ही एक व्यू पॉइंट था, and उनको लगता था कि सोसाइटी में birth right and gender distinctions का अपना ही एक importance है. That means, according to them, male and female could not be put on an equal footing, and according to them, there are certain people who get right by birth because they are born in an important family. So they wanted to preserve that birthright, and they wanted to preserve gender distinctions as well. Have a look at the picture, children. There are 4 stages in making of a manuscript. सबसे पहले पेपर बनाना एंड देन टेक्स्ट को लिखना, उसके बाद गोल्ड को मेल्ट करना ताकि कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट वर्ड्स हाईलाइट हो सके, एंड द लास्ट स्टेप इज टू बाइंड द बुक. So, here is the list of all the Delhi rulers in chronological order who ruled over Delhi, and altogether these 5 ruling dynasties are referred to as the Delhi Sultanate. The first dynasty to rule over Delhi within the Delhi Sultanate was Mamluk dynasty or the slave dynasty. They were the early Turkish rulers. Then came the Khalji dynasty, then the Tughlaqs, then Sayyid dynasty, and then Lodi dynasty. After Lodi dynasty, Mughal rulers came to power. But children, in this list which is given in your book also, there are some gaps. For example, Ghiyasuddin Balban, his rule ended in 1287 Common Era, and then Jalaluddin Khalji came to power in 1290. So what about the remaining years in 1288, 1289? So many such gaps are there in this list. These gaps are there because during such time periods, there was no clear leadership which established their rule in Delhi. Let's start with the early Turkish rulers. They were also called as Mamluk dynasty or slave dynasty because these rulers were actually slaves who came to power. Qutbuddin Aibak was the first one, then came Shamsuddin Iltutmish, then Razia Sultan, and then Ghiyasuddin Balban. Razia Sultan, who was the daughter of Shamsuddin Iltutmish, came to power in 1236 Common Era. She was the first and the only female ruler to rule over a Muslim dynasty. She had 4 brothers, लेकिन जो इल्तुतमिश थे उनको लगता था कि रजिया के कोई भी ब्रदर्स इतने इंटेलिजेंट नहीं थे कि वो सुल्तान बन सके. So he chose Razia to be the ruler. But many of the nobles in the Sultanate were not happy with Razia coming to power because they could not accept a woman as a ruler. So she could not remain on power for a long time, and she was removed from the throne in 1240 Common Era. It is important to mention some other women who became rulers within India. The first one is Rudrama Devi. She belonged to Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, and she avoided gender discrimination by changing her name on inscriptions, and she pretended to be a man. And then another one is Dida, which means Bibi. She ruled over Kashmir for some time. Children, Delhi is a very small city within India. But there were many Delhi Sultans who were able to expand their control beyond Delhi. So the next topic is about such expansion. But before proceeding further, it is important to understand the meaning of certain terms. For example, hinterland and garrison town. Hinterland means the land adjacent to a city or port that supply it with goods and services. For example, कोलकाता तो आप सब जानते होंगे, कोलकाता में एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट पोर्ट भी है. सो कोलकाता के आसपास के जितने भी स्टेट्स हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल बिहार, यूपी, पंजाब, हरियाणा, राजस्थान, इवन मध्य प्रदेश, दे ऑल आर सप्लाइड गुड्स थ्रू कोलकाता पोर्ट. सामान पहले कोलकाता पोर्ट पे आता है, उसके बाद इट इज सप्लाइड टू अदर एरियाज. सो ऑल दीज अदर स्टेट्स आर हिंटरलैंड फॉर कोलकाता पोर्ट. The next term is garrison town, which means a fortified settlement with soldiers. Simple words में बोला जाए तो एक किला, किला जिसको सैनिकों से सुरक्षित किया गया है. During the initial years of Delhi Sultans, the control of Delhi Sultanate was limited to fortified towns occupied by garrisons. यानी कि initially Delhi Sultans अपने किले तक ही सीमित थे और उस थोड़ा बहुत उसके आसपास का एरिया कंट्रोल करते थे, and all this area was heavily protected by garrisons, meaning the soldiers. The Sultans did not control the hinterland of the cities. मतलब वो सारा एरिया जहाँ पे से दिल्ली में गुड्स आते थे, सुल्तान वो एरिया कंट्रोल नहीं करते थे. So for supply of goods like eatables, like clothing, like jewelry, etc., they were dependent upon trade, tribute or plunder. यानी कि सारे सामान को या तो उन्हें खरीदना पड़ता था, या कोई उन्हें गिफ्ट दे जाता था, या उन्हें चोरी करना पड़ता था. controlling garrison towns in distant regions from Delhi was difficult. So Delhi से दूर के इलाकों को अगर Delhi Sultans ने कब्जा कर भी लिया, so controlling them from Delhi was difficult. Like the areas of Bengal, Sindh, which is in present-day Pakistan, they were very far away from Delhi. Apart from all this, Mongol invasion from Afghanistan placed a big challenge. Mongols belonged to Mongolia, which is a country above China, and Mongol empire एक बहुत बड़ा empire था. They had their expansion in Afghanistan also. So वहाँ पे से Mongol rulers started attacking Delhi Sultans, and apart from their attack, and many a times the governors of Delhi Sultans used to rebel. यानी कि वो बहुत बार rebel करके ये claim करते थे कि अब हम खुद राजा बन गए हैं. So many attacks and so many rebellions were posing a big challenge for Delhi Sultans, and the Sultanate barely survived these challenges. बहुत बार Sultans expand करते थे अपने एरिया को, and very quickly the areas used to become independent. Now we are going to study Khalji dynasty and Tughlaq dynasty in detail. In the Khalji dynasty, initially Jalaluddin Khalji ruled, and then Alauddin Khalji. After Khaljis, Tughlaqs came to power, and the first ruler was Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, then came Muhammad Tughlaq, and then Firoz Shah Tughlaq. So एक तरफ Mongols के attacks and दूसरी तरफ rebellion by governors. In the middle of all this, how did the expansion of Delhi Sultanate take place? So Delhi Sultanate का expansion हुआ majorly during the reigns of Ghiyasuddin Balban, who belonged to Mamluk dynasty, and Alauddin Khalji, and then under Muhammad Tughlaq. The expansion took place along internal and external frontiers. अब इसका मतलब क्या है? Internal frontier means that initially sultans tried to expand in the areas around Delhi, and external frontiers means the rulers, they tried to expand in areas much beyond Delhi. So along the internal frontier, the main aim of sultans was to control the hinterland of the garrison town. यानी कि किले के आसपास के जो एरिया जो किले को goods supply करते थे, उन areas को control करना उनका सबसे पहला aim बना. And then they even got the forests cleared between the areas of Ganga and Yamuna rivers. और जब जंगल खाली कराए गए, तो उस जंगल में जो लोग रहते थे, that is the hunters, gatherers, the pastoralists, they were all removed, they were all expelled from their land. Pastoralists मतलब जो चरवाहे होते हैं, जो जानवर चरवाते हैं. And then all this land which was cleared, it was brought under cultivation. New fortresses and towns were also established. Apart from this, they also expanded along the external frontier. यानी कि अब उन्होंने expand करना शुरू किया South India में. Alauddin Khalji ने शुरू किया, and then finally Muhammad Tughlaq tried with it, and after that it got over. Sultanate armies, they captured elephants, horses, slaves, precious metals, etc. And gradually the empire expanded. Children, एरिया पे कब्जा करना या किंगडम को एक्सपैंड करना ही सब कुछ नहीं होता. उस एक्सपैंडेड एरिया को चलाना, उसको रूल करना is also very important. So let's proceed to our next topic, that is administration under the Delhi Sultans. But before proceeding further, let's understand the meaning of certain terms. The first one is Bandagan. Bandagan were the slaves purchased for military service by Delhi Sultans. Generally slaves पे हमेशा बहुत odd jobs करवाए जाते थे, but these slaves were purchased for military service. Then the next term is Ikta. Khaljis and Tughlaqs ने ऐसे military commanders appoint किए जिनको एक territory दे दी जाती थी अलग अलग size की, और उस टेरिटरी पे उनको रूल भी करना होता था, वहाँ पे मिलिट्री भी मेंटेन करनी होती थी. एंड दीज लैंड्स वर कॉल्ड एज इक्ताज, एंड द होल्डर ऑफ इक्ता वाज कॉल्ड अ मुक्ति और एन इक्तदार. यानी कि वो मिलिट्री कमांडर जिसको इक्ता मिला है उसको मुक्ति भी कह सकते हैं, इक्तदार भी कह सकते हैं. एंड दीज मिलिट्री कमांडर्स, दे यूज्ड टू हेल्प द किंग इन द टाइम ऑफ वॉर. Here are the functions of muktis. One of their main function was to lead a military campaign. That means whenever king needed somebody to fight a battle with his opponent, then they used these muktis, because muktis maintained military as well. Then another function was to maintain law and order in their ikka, that means in their land. They even collected taxes from the land given to them, and from that money they used to pay salary to their soldiers. So, in a nutshell, maintaining a huge empire was never easy for any sultan. So he divided his land into various parts, and those parts were given to military commanders. Those military commanders ruled over those small parts, but in all this, they remained subordinate to the Delhi Sultan. Now, sultans took some special measures to ensure that muktis performed their duties well. First one is their office was not made hereditary. That means agar father ek mukti hai, so it's not necessary that his son will also be a mukti. Then next, they were assigned iktas for a short period of time, and then that ikta was transferred. यानी कि उनको जो land मिला है थोड़े time के लिए मिलता था, हमेशा के लिए नहीं. Then accountants were also appointed to check the amount of revenue collected by the muktis. कितना revenue collect कर रहे हैं वो state fix कर देती थी, and care was taken कि एक मुक्ति उतना ही टैक्स कलेक्ट करे जितना प्रिस्क्राइब किया गया, उससे ज्यादा ना कलेक्ट करे. एंड केयर वाज आल्सो टेकन दैट द मुक्तीज कीप अ रिक्वायर्ड नंबर ऑफ सोल्जर्स, क्योंकि किंग्स उनसे मदद लेते थे ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ वॉर, तो उसके लिए सोल्जर्स की जरूरत होती थी. सो एक तरफ मंगोल्स के अटैक्स एंड दूसरी तरफ रिबेलियन बाय गवर्नर्स. इन द मिडल ऑफ ऑल दिस, हाउ डिड द एक्सपेंशन ऑफ दिल्ली सल्तनत टेक प्लेस? सो दिल्ली सल्तनत का एक्सपेंशन हुआ majorly during the reigns of Ghiyasuddin Balban, who belonged to Mamluk dynasty, and Alauddin Khalji, and then under Muhammad Tughlaq. The expansion took place along internal and external frontiers. अब इसका मतलब क्या है? Internal frontier means that initially sultans tried to expand in the areas around Delhi, and external frontiers means the rulers, they tried to expand in areas much beyond Delhi. So along the internal frontier, the main aim of sultans was to control the hinterland of the garrison town. यानी कि किले के आसपास के जो एरिया जो किले को goods supply करते थे, उन एरियाज को कंट्रोल करना उनका सबसे पहला एम बना. And then they even got the forests cleared between the areas of Ganga and Yamuna rivers. और जब जंगल खाली कराए गए तो उस जंगल में जो लोग रहते थे, that is the hunters, gatherers, the pastoralists, they were all removed, they were all expelled from their land. Pastoralists मतलब जो चरवाहे होते हैं, जो जानवर चरवाते हैं. And then all this land which was cleared, it was brought under cultivation. New fortresses and towns were also established. Apart from this, they also expanded along the external frontier. यानी कि अब उन्होंने expand करना शुरू किया साउथ इंडिया में. अलाउद्दीन खलजी ने शुरू किया, and then finally during Alauddin Khalji's reign, 3 types of taxes were collected. That is house tax, cattle tax, and kharaj. Kharaj का मतलब है it was a tax on 50% of the produce. जितना प्रोडक्शन किया है उसका 50% पे टैक्स देना होता था. Children, it is important to remember here that large parts of Indian subcontinent remained outside the control of Delhi Sultans. Controlling distant regions from Delhi, like Bengal, was not an easy task. कुछ सुल्तान्स ने कैप्चर किया सर्दर्न इंडिया को, एंड बहुत ही जल्दी वो एरिया इंडिपेंडेंट हो गया. इवन द एरियाज ऑफ Gangetic Plain, they were largely forested areas, and it was difficult for Sultan armies to penetrate into those areas. At the time of Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq, they tried to control areas with difficult terrain, but even they could not rule for long. And by 1219, Mongols under Genghis Khan, they invaded parts of Iran and parts of Transylvania. और उसके just बाद they started attacking the Delhi Sultanate. Mongols belonged to Mongolia, और उन्होंने Delhi Sultanate के ऊपर बहुत attacks किए. Especially during the reign of Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq, these attacks increased a lot. और इसकी वजह से दोनों रूलर्स को mobilize करनी पड़ी एक large standing army, and maintaining a large standing army and maintaining a large empire posed a huge administrative challenge. So now let's study what challenges these sultans faced. Now let's study the differences in the measures taken by Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq to deal with Mongol invasion. First thing is they both raised a large standing army. Now what is standing army? Standing army is that army which is always on duty whether it is wartime or peacetime. It is different from reserved army. Okay, then Alauddin Khalji, in order to station these large number of soldiers, constructed a new town and he named it as city. But Muhammad Tughlaq इतने सारे soldiers को रखने के लिए उन्होंने एक नई city establish नहीं की. Rather, दिल्ली की एक old city जिसका नाम था दिल्ली एक कुन्हा, उन्होंने उस city को खाली करवाया, वहाँ के residents को बाहर निकाला and he stationed his soldiers over there. And these residents, they were sent to the new capital which he established, and the name of this capital was Daulatabad, and this region of Daulatabad lies in Maharashtra. Now this large army had to be fed, यानी कि इतने सारे soldiers को खाना खिलाना था. So ये कैसे हुआ? During Alauddin Khalji's reign, soldiers were fed using the produce collected as tax from lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. Tax was fixed at 50% of the peasants' yield. मतलब अगर किसी peasant ने 1 किलो चावल उगाए हैं तो उसमें से 500 ग्राम चावल उसको स्टेट को देने होंगे in the form of tax. यानी कि टैक्स कैश के रूप में नहीं लिया जाएगा, रादर ग्रेन के रूप में कलेक्ट किया जाएगा. मोहम्मद तुगलक, what he did, he also collected the produce from the area as tax for feeding the army. लेकिन उन्होंने एक और चीज की, he even levied additional taxes to meet the expenses of maintaining a large number of soldiers. तो उन्होंने taxes बढ़ा दिए and all this coincided with famine in that area, यानी कि उस एरिया में shortage of food हो गया and which caused widespread rebellion. Now the next difference is regarding salary. Alauddin Khalji, he paid his soldiers in cash and he also controlled prices of essential goods. क्योंकि अगर soldiers essential goods नहीं खरीद पाते उनके महंगे प्राइस की वजह से, तो उनको ज्यादा सैलरी देनी पड़ती and they could have revolted as well. So Khalji, he controlled the prices of goods. Muhammad Tughlaq, he also paid the soldiers in cash, but he did not control the prices. And what mistake he did is he minted new coins that were made up of cheap metals instead of making it from gold and silver. लोगों ने इन कॉइन्स पे विश्वास नहीं किया and people were very smart. उन्होंने अपने gold and silver coins तो रखे अपने पास and he paid their taxes using this currency made up of cheap metals. And this currency could also be counterfeited easily, यानी कि इन सिक्कों के नकली सिक्के बहुत बनाए जा सकते थे और लोगों ने बनाए भी. So इससे मोहम्मद तुगलक को बहुत नुकसान हुआ. Alauddin Khalji's administration was very successful and the chroniclers of his time, they praised him for keeping the prices in control and for ensuring efficient supply of goods in the market, and he gave a strong opposition to Mongol invasions. On the other hand, Muhammad Tughlaq's administrative methods were a huge failure. He सबसे पहले तो उन्होंने residents से आपको उनकी सिटी से बाहर निकाल दिया, उसके बाद उन्होंने टैक्सेस इंक्रीज कर दिए and all this was accompanied by a famine and this led to widespread rebellion. And then he issued a currency which was made up of cheap metals which gave a huge loss to the state, so that currency also had to be called back. And he even campaigned into Kashmir, which was also a failure. And then later on he decided that now he will not invade Transoxiana. तो इतनी बड़ी जो army create की थी, अब वो useless हो गई. So he had to disband such a large army. So his measures were a total disaster and failure. And the last difference, Alauddin Khalji, his measures were defensive, यानी कि उन्होंने वो measures लिए जिससे वो अपने आप को बचा सके. But Muhammad Tughlaq ने वो वो measures लिए जिनसे वो attack कर सके. His measures were offensive. Let's see the list of rulers who ruled over Delhi once again. Initially, the Tomara Rajputs ruled, and then came the Mamluk dynasty, then came the Khalji dynasty, and then Tughlaqs. After Khaljis and Tughlaqs, it was the time period of Sayyid dynasty, and after Sayyid dynasty, Lodi dynasty came to power. The last ruler of Lodi dynasty was Ibrahim Lodi, who was defeated by Babur in the year 1526. And with the defeat of Ibrahim Lodi, the rule of Delhi Sultanate came to an end. And this started the rule of Mughal dynasty. The first ruler was Babur, and he ruled for about 4 years. Then came Humayun, who initially ruled for about 10 years. And Humayun was defeated by Sher Shah Suri, who established Sur Empire. Sur Empire also continued for a short period of time for about 15 years, and then Humayun was again able to regain his control, and then Mughal dynasty continued for a long period of time. About Mughal rulers we'll read in the next chapter. So let's study some interesting facts. So students, mosque kahin ya masjid, it is a place of worship for Muslims. But what is a congregational mosque? As the name suggests, a congregational mosque is one wherein Muslims read their prayers in groups, as shown in the picture. These prayers are led by a learned male who is called an imam. Muslims जब नमाज अदा करते हैं, अपनी prayers करते हैं, उस वक्त वो उस direction को face करते हैं जहाँ पे Mecca है. Mecca is a place in Saudi Arabia, and Mecca इंडिया के वेस्ट में है. So Muslims while praying face towards the west, and this direction that they face is called Qibla. Then children, several mosques were built by the Delhi Sultans in cities all over the subcontinent. For example, Quwat al-Aslam Mosque and Minaret, ये कुतुबुद्दीन ऐबक and इल्तुतमिश ने बनवाई थी, and इल्तुतमिश and अलाउद्दीन खिलजी ने इनको expand भी कराया. Then Begumpuri Mosque, it was built during the reign of Muhammad Tughlaq. This mosque was the main mosque of the city of Jahanpana, and Jahanpana was also called as the sanctuary of the world. Then Maut Ki Masjid, it was built during the reign of Sikandar Lodi by his minister, and then Mosque of Jamali Kamali, it was built during late 1520s. Okay children, during early time, many travelers visited India, and whatever they saw, whatever they understood, they wrote it. And these writings are called as account of travelers. From these writings, we get a lot of information about India. So one such traveler was Ibn Battuta. He was a 14th century traveler and he belonged to Morocco. So what he saw, उन्होंने क्या देखा कि जो chieftains थे वो अपने आप को protect करने के लिए mountains में, rocky and uneven places में अपने किले बनाते थे. And at times they used to live in bamboo groves, यानी कि bamboo का एक fort बना लिया अपने around. The bamboos that are available in India are so big and so interconnected that even fire cannot affect them. So ये chieftains उन bamboo groves के अंदर रहते थे, अपनी cattle भी वहीं पे रखते थे, crops भी, पानी भी वहीं पे होता था, and they even used to collect rainwater over there. So only big and strong armies who could cut these bamboos after entering these forests could only attack these chieftains. Here are some important questions from the chapter, children. Pause the video here and try to answer these. So, this brings us to the end of the chapter. Hope you liked the video, and if you did not, please comment what were the shortcomings. Thank you so much.